I spent the entire afternoon carefully preparing his favorite meal, perfectly roasted chicken coated in a rich, garlicky butter sauce, smooth and creamy mashed potatoes whipped to perfection, and crisp green beans tossed in just the right amount of seasoning to bring out their fresh, earthy flavor. I wanted everything to be perfect, from the golden brown skin of the chicken to the way the aroma of the herbs filled our small apartment, creating a warm, inviting atmosphere that made it feel like home. I set the table with the plates we usually saved for special occasions, dimmed the lights just enough to make the room feel intimate, and even lit a few candles, their soft glow flickering against the walls as if setting the stage for the perfect evening. Tonight was supposed to be special. When he finally walked through the door, looking exhausted from his long day, his expression immediately softened as he inhaled the scent of the meal I had spent hours preparing. His eyes briefly widened with what looked like genuine appreciation before he set his bag down near the door and exhaled a deep, satisfied sigh. "Wow," he murmured, running a hand through his hair before stepping further inside. "You really went all out." A small, proud smile tugged at my lips as I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel and turned to face him. "I just wanted to do something nice for you," I said, watching as he took in the sight of the table, the neatly arranged silverware, and the plates filled with the food I knew he loved more than anything. For a moment, as he walked over and pulled me into a gentle hug, pressing a light kiss against my forehead, I felt that familiar warmth bloom in my chest, the same warmth I always felt when I looked at him, when I remembered why I had fallen in love with him in the first place. We sat down together, the flickering candlelight casting soft shadows across his face as he took his first bite. He chewed slowly, his eyes momentarily closing as he savored the food, and then he let out a small, appreciative hum. "This is amazing," he finally said, reaching for my hand across the table and giving it a gentle squeeze. "You always know how to make my day better." I laughed softly, my fingers lacing with his, enjoying the simple intimacy of the moment, the way everything felt so peaceful, so normal, until my phone, resting on the counter just a few feet away, vibrated with a quiet but insistent buzz that sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. At first, I ignored it, unwilling to break the moment we were sharing, but something deep in my gut told me to check, told me that for some reason, I needed to see who was reaching out to me so late in the evening. I pulled my hand away gently, offering him an apologetic glance before standing and retrieving my phone. When I looked at the screen, my breath caught in my throat. A message. From an unknown number. My fingers tightened around the device as I hesitated, my pulse picking up just slightly, a strange creeping sense of unease settling over me as I read the words that flashed across the screen. "You don't know me, but you need to hear this. He's been lying to you." The air in the room suddenly felt thicker, heavier, as if all the warmth from the candles and the comforting smell of dinner had been sucked out in an instant, replaced with a slow, suffocating dread that crawled up my spine and made my hands feel clammy. I swallowed hard, my mind instantly racing through all the possibilities, all the explanations for why someone would send me a message like this, but none of them made sense. My first instinct was to believe it was a mistake, that someone had texted the wrong number, but deep down, something about it felt too deliberate, too pointed, too perfectly timed for it to be a coincidence. "Something wrong." His voice cut through the silence, snapping me out of my daze. I quickly turned off the phone screen and forced a smile, shaking my head as I walked back to the table, my heart hammering just a little harder than before. "No, just work stuff," I lied, slipping my phone into my lap, suddenly hyper-aware of every movement he made, every flicker of emotion that crossed his face. He nodded slowly, but for just a split second, so brief I almost missed it, there was something in his eyes. A flicker of tension, a barely perceptible shift in his expression, as if he knew something I didn't. I wanted to shake the feeling off, to convince myself I was overthinking, but no matter how much I tried, I couldn't ignore the way my stomach twisted uncomfortably as I stared down at my plate, suddenly losing my appetite. Something wasn't right, and I had a terrible feeling that this message was only the beginning. I tried to push the message out of my mind, to focus on the meal, on him, on the warmth of the candlelight and the comfort of our familiar routine, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop my thoughts from spiraling. The words from that unknown number were burned into my brain, replaying over and over again, each repetition making my stomach churn a little more violently. "He's been lying to you." It was such a simple statement, yet it carried the weight of something much larger, something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I stole a glance at him across the table, watching as he took another bite, his expression unreadable, the soft flicker of the candlelight casting moving shadows across his features. He looked normal, calm, unbothered. But now I couldn't help but wonder, was it real? Or was it just an illusion? I forced myself to take another bite, chewing slowly, but the food that had once smelled so rich and comforting now tasted like nothing at all. "Are you sure everything's okay?" His voice was gentle, but there was an edge to it, something almost cautious. His fork hovered just above his plate, his gaze fixed on me in a way that made my pulse quicken, though I had no idea why. I nodded quickly, offering a small smile that I hoped looked convincing. Yeah, just tired. Long day. He studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable, and then, just like that, the tension in his face melted away. He smiled, reaching for his glass of wine and taking a slow sip before setting it back down with a soft clink against the table. You should get some rest, he said smoothly, his tone gentle, but something about it sent a chill through me. You've been working so hard lately. You deserve a break. For the first time since I had known him, his words didn't feel comforting. They felt calculated. I swallowed hard, nodding, before glancing down at my phone in my lap. I hesitated for only a moment before, with careful, deliberate movements, I unlocked it and quickly typed out a response to the unknown number. Who are you? What do you mean? I hit send and waited, my pulse thudding in my ears. Nothing. The screen stayed dark. No reply. I took a slow breath, trying to calm myself, but the unease coiling in my stomach refused to go away. I needed to do something. Needed to figure out if this was just some kind of cruel joke or if there was something deeper, something I was too blind or too afraid to see. After we finished dinner, I cleared the plates, washing them slowly, methodically, trying to give myself time to think. He stood behind me, his arms slipping around my waist, his lips brushing against my neck, and I forced myself to smile, to lean into his touch, even as my mind screamed at me that something was wrong. Come to bed soon, he murmured against my skin, his voice low and soft, the way it always was when he wanted to pull me into his orbit, make me forget about everything else. I nodded, turning just enough to meet his gaze, forcing my lips into a reassuring smile. Yeah, just finishing up here. He lingered for a moment, studying me, as if trying to read my mind, and then, finally, he pressed one last kiss to my temple before stepping away. I waited until I heard the bedroom door close before I grabbed my phone again. My hands were shaking. Still no response. I clenched my jaw, my heart pounding. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe it really was a mistake, just some random person texting the wrong number. But deep down, I knew better. I needed to know the truth. And there was only one way to find out. I took a deep breath and made a decision. I was going to go through his things. The apartment was eerily silent as I stood in the dim glow of the kitchen, my hands gripping the edge of the counter while my mind raced through every possible outcome of what I was about to do. I had never snooped through his things before, not because I had never had the opportunity, but because I had never felt the need. I had trusted him. I had believed every word he had ever told me, never once questioning whether or not he was capable of lying to me. But now I wasn't sure of anything. I wiped my damp palms against my jeans, exhaling slowly as I stepped cautiously toward the bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, and as I peered inside, I saw him lying on his side, his back to me, his breathing deep and steady. He was asleep. At least, I hoped he was. Moving as quietly as possible, I slipped inside, my heart hammering against my ribs as I crossed the room. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for his nightstand, easing the drawer open just enough to peer inside. It was mostly filled with the usual things: spare change, an old pair of earbuds, a few receipts that looked like they had been stuffed inside and forgotten about. Nothing unusual. I released a slow breath, feeling foolish for expecting to find some kind of incriminating evidence sitting right there in plain sight. Of course, it wouldn't be that easy. I turned toward his dresser next, hesitating only briefly before pulling open the top drawer. Clothes. Socks, folded t-shirts, the familiar scent of his cologne clinging to the fabric. Again, nothing out of the ordinary. I was beginning to wonder if I was making a mistake, if maybe I had let that stupid message get under my skin for no reason when I reached the bottom drawer. This one was different. Unlike the others, which had opened smoothly, this drawer stuck slightly when I pulled at it, as if something inside was wedged too tightly. I tugged again, a little harder this time, and after a brief struggle, it slid open with a soft thunk. And there, buried beneath a stack of old sweaters and hoodies, was a small black box. My stomach flipped. It was the kind of box that looked like it should hold jewelry, but something about the way it was tucked away, hidden beneath layers of fabric, sent a chill down my spine. My fingers hovered over it for a brief moment before I finally gathered the courage to pick it up. The box was heavier than I expected. Swallowing hard, I carefully lifted the lid and immediately felt the air leave my lungs. Inside was a collection of items that made my entire body go cold. A photograph of me, taken from a distance, one I had never seen before. A small silver key. A folded piece of paper with an address written in bold, uneven handwriting. And, tucked beneath it all, a single ring. Not an engagement ring, not anything romantic. Just a simple, plain gold band. I stared at the items, my heart hammering so loudly I was afraid it would wake him. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the paper, my eyes scanning the address over and over again, trying to figure out why it felt familiar, why something about it sent a bolt of pure panic through my chest. Then suddenly I knew. It was the address of an abandoned house on the other side of town. A house I had passed before but had never paid much attention to. A house that, for some reason, he had written down and hidden away in a box beneath his clothes. I had no idea what it meant. But I knew one thing for certain. I had to go there. A deep, suffocating sense of dread wrapped itself around me as I stared at the address on the paper, my pulse hammering so violently that I was afraid the sound of my heartbeat would wake him. The box in my hands suddenly felt heavier, as if the weight of the truth I wasn't even sure of yet, was pressing down on my chest, making it harder to breathe. What the hell was this? The photograph of me, taken from a distance, the key, the address, and that plain gold band. None of it made sense. Or maybe, deep down, I was too afraid to piece the puzzle together, too terrified of what I might find if I did. I swallowed hard, carefully placing everything back into the box exactly as I had found it, making sure nothing looked disturbed before I slid the drawer shut as quietly as possible. My hands were shaking, my entire body tense with the overwhelming need to get out of that room before I made a mistake, before he somehow sensed what I had done, before he woke up and saw the fear written all over my face. I backed away from the dresser, moving toward the door as silently as I could, my bare feet barely making a sound against the floor. As soon as I was out in the hallway, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding, my mind already racing ahead, trying to come up with a plan. I needed to know what that address meant. I needed to know who had sent me that message. And most of all, I needed to know the truth about the man I had been sharing my life with. I grabbed my coat from the hook near the door, my fingers fumbling slightly as I pulled it on. My phone buzzed softly in my pocket, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. My breath hitched as I pulled it out, my stomach twisting into knots when I saw another message from the unknown number. If you go there, go alone. Don't trust him. Don't tell him. I felt my blood turn to ice. They knew. Whoever this was, they knew exactly what I was thinking, exactly what I was about to do. I should have been terrified. And I was. But more than that, I was desperate for answers. Without another moment of hesitation, I slipped out of the apartment, the night air biting against my skin as I hurried down the street, my footsteps quick and quiet against the pavement. I had no idea what I would find when I got to that house. But something told me that once I did, nothing in my life would ever be the same again. The night air was crisp and eerily silent as I walked, my breath forming small clouds in the dim glow of the streetlights. The city felt different at night, emptier, more sinister. Every shadow stretched too far, every noise seemed amplified. My footsteps echoed as I made my way toward the address on that folded piece of paper, the slip of it still clenched tightly in my hand like some kind of lifeline. I told myself I wasn't scared, that I wasn't walking into something dangerous, that this was just some misunderstanding, some bizarre coincidence. But deep down, I knew better. I pulled my phone out, my thumb hovering over my messages. I wanted to text someone, maybe my best friend, maybe even the police. But what would I even say? That I had found a hidden box in my boyfriend's dresser, and now I was sneaking off to some unknown house in the middle of the night because a stranger had texted me? No one would take me seriously. And worst of all, a tiny voice in my head whispered, "What if he finds out you told someone?" I shivered, shaking off the thought, and forced myself to focus. It took me nearly 20 minutes to reach the outskirts of town, where the buildings thinned out and the streets became quieter, lined with long-forgotten warehouses and boarded-up homes. The address led me to a house at the end of a dark, empty street, barely illuminated by a single flickering lamppost. The place looked abandoned. Its windows were shattered in places, the wooden panels of the porch warped and rotting from years of neglect. A no trespassing sign hung loosely from one of the front pillars, swaying in the breeze. I swallowed hard. Something about this place felt wrong. Like it wasn't just abandoned. It had been left behind for a reason. I glanced around, making sure I wasn't being followed, then cautiously stepped forward. My sneakers made the old wooden steps groan under my weight as I approached the front door, my pulse hammering so loudly I was sure it would give me away. I reached for the doorknob locked. That's when I remembered the small silver key from the box. I hesitated. What were the chances that this key, his key, fit this house? My hands were trembling as I pulled the key from my pocket, my fingers ice cold as I slid it into the lock. The moment it clicked open, my breath caught in my throat. I shouldn't be here. I knew that. But something was pulling me forward, some invisible thread tying me to whatever truth lay beyond this door. I pushed it open slowly. The hinges groaned in protest, and a musty, stale scent hit me instantly. A mixture of dust, decay, and something else, something faintly metallic that made my stomach twist. The house was dark, except for the moonlight filtering in through the broken windows. I stepped inside, the wooden floor creaking beneath my weight, and pulled my phone out, turning on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the ruined remains of what had once been a living room. Old furniture sat covered in sheets, the fabric stained and torn. A fireplace, long unused, was filled with ash and debris. Graffiti covered the peeling wallpaper. I took another step forward, my breath catching when I noticed something that sent a bolt of ice through my veins. On the far wall, half hidden beneath layers of grime and faded paint, was something I recognized. A photograph. Of me. Pinned to the wall, partially torn, the edges curling with age. I stumbled back, my flashlight shaking in my grip as I scanned the room frantically. My mind was screaming at me to run, but my body wouldn't move. There were more photographs. Some new, some old. Some from before I had even met him. And then there were the notes. Scrawled across the walls, barely legible in the dim light. She doesn't know. She won't remember. Keep her close. Keep her safe. A sharp noise made me freeze. A floorboard creaked. Asterisk, asterisk behind me. Asterisk, asterisk. I spun around so fast that my phone nearly slipped from my fingers, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly against the walls. For a long, terrifying moment, there was nothing. Just silence. Just darkness. Then, barely a whisper. Asterisk, asterisk, but close. Asterisk, asterisk. Why did you come here? My blood turned to ice. That voice. His voice. I barely had time to react before a hand clamped over my wrist. I was paralyzed, caught between the cold metal of his grip and the overwhelming fear that crawled up my spine. I could feel his breath on the back of my neck, slow and deliberate, like he was savoring my terror. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out all other sounds, but I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. You should have stayed away, he whispered again, his voice like a blade cutting through the air. I finally found the strength to turn, to face him, but my legs felt like jelly, unsteady under me. There he was, standing in the shadows just beyond the dim light of my phone's beam, his face half hidden in the darkness. I could make out the outline of his features, the sharp jaw, the hollowed eyes, and the way he stood, unnervingly still, as if he were waiting for something. Or someone. Why are you doing this? My voice was shaky, barely a whisper. His lips curled into a cruel smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. They were cold, unblinking, staring at me with a terrifying intensity. You came here on your own, he said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. You're the one who unlocked the door. You're the one who found the key. I felt the blood drain from my face. The key. The one from the box. How had he known? Had he been watching me all this time? I tried to pull my wrist from his grip, but his hold tightened. You need to understand, he continued, his voice low and almost pitying. There's a reason you're here. You just haven't figured it out yet. I could barely breathe, let alone make sense of what he was saying. This had to be some kind of sick game. A twisted joke, one I was unlucky enough to be a part of. Who are you? I demanded, my voice barely above a whisper, the words trembling in my throat. For a moment, his smile faltered, replaced by something darker. It doesn't matter, he said, voice hardening. You'll understand soon enough. Before I could process what he meant, he shoved me backward, sending me stumbling into the darkness. My phone flew from my hand, its flashlight flickering out as it hit the floor. Panic surged within me. I reached for it, heart racing, but I was too slow. A heavy boot pressed down on it before I could grab it. No one can hear you, he said, his voice too close. This place is far from anything. You came here alone, and you'll leave alone too. I couldn't breathe. My lungs felt like they were closing in, my thoughts scattered, slipping away. What did he want from me? Why was I here? Please, just let me go, I begged, the words tumbling out in a rush, the fear making me feel small and weak. I don't understand. I don't know what you want. He didn't answer. Instead, his hand shot out again, gripping my arm and pulling me toward the back of the house. Every step felt like it was leading me deeper into the void. Come on, he murmured, his voice low and almost soothing. You need to see it. You need to understand. I was trembling uncontrollably now, my mind reeling with confusion and terror. I had no idea what I was walking into, or why he was so certain of something that I didn't understand. His grip on my arm was firm, but the cold fear in my chest was stronger. Please, I whispered again, my voice strained. I don't want this. I don't want any of this. But he didn't seem to hear. Or perhaps he didn't care. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever, shadows twisting into grotesque shapes on the walls. My heartbeat was deafening in my ears, drowning out everything else. I had to think, I had to get out of here, somehow. But as I walked further, the grip on my arm tightened, pulling me forward with a cold inevitability. We reached a door at the end of the hall. He opened it without a word, stepping aside to let me enter first. My stomach churned with dread. The room was dim, just a single light hanging from the ceiling that barely illuminated the space. A large table sat in the center, covered with something draped under a dark cloth. Look, he said quietly, gesturing to the table. There was a strange finality in his tone, as if this was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment where everything would finally make sense. But I didn't want it to make sense. I wanted to run. I looked at the cloth, but I couldn't bring myself to move closer. Something about it was wrong. Something in the air thickened, heavy with the scent of decay. Why are you doing this? I whispered again, my voice breaking, eyes flicking to the door, my mind screaming for escape. His cold smile returned, cruel and knowing. You'll understand soon enough. But first, you need to make a choice. I froze. A choice. His eyes gleamed as he stepped toward me, his presence overwhelming. Yes, you need to decide who you're going to be. Him. He paused, his hand reaching toward the table, lifting the cloth to reveal what was beneath. My breath caught in my throat. There was no hiding it. It was him, the man I had been running from. His face was pale, lifeless, eyes staring blankly into the ceiling. The gruesome truth settled on me like a weight. My pulse hammered in my ears as I stepped back. What is this? My voice cracked, desperate for some semblance of logic in this nightmare. His smile didn't waver. It's your choice, he said softly, his words like poison. You can either walk away, forget all of this, and never return, or you can join him. Become like him. I could barely comprehend what he was saying, my mind screaming at me to do something anything to escape. But the question hung in the air, suffocating me. Who was I? What was I supposed to do in this moment? I looked at the body on the table, at the man who had haunted my every step. His death. My fear. The choice. In that single, suffocating moment, I realized I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know who I should be. The grip on my arm loosened, but I couldn't move. I couldn't decide. Do you know what you want, or will you be like him? His voice was insistent, pulling me back to the moment. But my mind was lost in the chaos of it all. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what I wanted. And as the room closed in around me, all I could do was stand there, paralyzed, caught between the decision I couldn't make and the fear I couldn't escape.